Hi there, I'm Thomas Michaud, and this is a monthly live session for Real Guitar Success students. This is May's session. Today I've got a bunch of stuff. I hope I can squeeze it all into an hour. But let me start by saying just a little about the format here, in case you're new here. If you're watching this on the Real Guitar Success website, there's a chat box below. And you can look at that chat box anytime and ask questions. Now, I'll wait till the end of some material I'm going to present to answer any questions. But let me start off by saying that I love questions, and I certainly will reserve time at the end. Also, I've gotten some questions ahead of time, and I'll answer those first. Live practice challenge that I started this month, and I've already got some great comments from it, and thank you. I appreciate that. Steve, I just saw yours today. Thank you very much. This is not something I came up with on my own. Actually, I got the idea from a website, Tony's Acoustic Challenge. Tony's Acoustic Challenge. I almost said guitar challenge. It's Tony's Acoustic Challenge. A wonderful website. And Tony Polastro, there, I think I said his name right. Wonderful teacher. Absolutely wonderful. I couldn't say enough good things. And I wanted to integrate something like this into my own website, Real Guitar Success. Now, I've changed the idea a little bit. The structure's similar, but I'm adding a theme each month. So this month, the theme is Shades of Blue, blues. It's because most of the exercises and licks are kind of bluesy in sound, and I've incorporated that shuffle rhythm. Each month, I'll do something a little bit different, but my intention is to give you exercise to practice a little bit every day. And regardless of whether that's the style you want to learn or not, there'll be valuable exercises that'll help you move forward step by step. I'm thinking just 10 minutes a day. This gives you something practical to practice. You don't have to make up something. And this is in addition to any of the other resources on the website, like the roadmap or the individual courses or the quick wins. 10 minutes a day on this, you'll know you're moving forward, and you get a chance to check off. And at the end of the month's material, they'll all be checked off. I'll figure out some way to have some kind of drawing or something to make it a little more exciting. But if nothing else, you'll have some material under your belt, and I'll move on to something new in the next month. Now, my intention also is to eventually, for you to be able to mark which ones of these that you like the best and you want to come back to later so that you can find them. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but I will. So blues, keeping in that theme, I've put together some blues licks, and I'll call it a blues adventure. Let me play something for you. It's all based on that 12-bar blues pattern that we did in the practice challenge this month. Let me play something for you, and then I'll go back and kind of take it apart and show you how you can apply some of these things directly to your own playing. So this is all 12-bar blues in E. Start on the simple side. I'm using a shuffle strum. Another E7. Exact same 12-bar blues, different groove. This is A. And back to E. Do a regular B7, A7, now back to that E group. Check this out. Now I'm going to throw in there another leg. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. And please don't worry if this might look over your head. It's not. Pick and choose what works for you. Let me break it down and give you some things to work on. Let me start with the first part of that is the basic 12-bar blues, only I've added a different form of E7. This is the one that I did in the practice challenge, but this is a little more interesting version. Now, by the way, there's not one right or wrong. It's just a variation, and it gives you some different ways of adding color to a blues pattern. So this puts the 7th in my pinky, and that makes it a little more audible. You hear it because it's higher in pitch. So this is E7, and this is E7, adding the pinky. That's the pinky on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. So even a regular E chord with that will make it E7. And you could add another 7th note by taking off your 3rd finger, and there's another 7th of the chord there. So if you just want to practice this, try just using the E chord and adding the pinky, 3rd fret, 2nd string. Now for the A, basically I'm doing the same thing. I'm adding the pinky on the 3rd fret, 1st string, and that's, again, the 7th note. Because it's high, it tends to stick out more. I like to play the A like this, and I mentioned this before. It's easier for me, but it does involve having to bar slightly, partial bar, the 4th and 3rd strings on the 2nd fret, and then I put my 2nd finger on the 2nd fret, 2nd string. I'm used to that and go do it very quickly, but it's not better or worse than this version. This has the advantage of being able to just take off the finger like that. I use both, though I use this more often. And then for the 7th, a lot of people use the 3rd finger there. I like to use my pinky because it keeps me from having to kind of twist around. If your pinky's strong, I think this is easier. If your pinky's not that strong, this 3rd finger version might be easier. And again, that's the 3rd fret, 1st string, E7. So I'm doing alternating, E and then E7, and with a strum. Then A, and I'm alternating again. E7. I don't have a version of that for B7, so I just do that. A, A7, E, E7, and end on B7. Have 12 bars. Okay. So, valuable chords regardless of whether you want to play blues or not. But they're particularly useful in blues because that 7th sound really sounds bluesy. Now, the 2-note shuffle groove, I'll call it. Shuffle strum, shuffle groove. This is the same if you were doing a Chuck Berry tune, a rock and roll. Only it adds a shuffle strum. Let me talk a little bit about the shuffle strum again. I know I've done this in some of the lessons, but I want to maybe expand it a little bit. Shuffle strum is based on triplet pattern. Da, 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 da. But the first 2 beats are added together, so you're really only hitting twice. Da, 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 da. I usually go up and down, so when I'm teaching students at first, I have them just go down so they don't have to worry about the right hand, but I usually go da, 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 da. That's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So with a chord, it sounds like this. Da, faster. It adds a lilt to it. That first part, da, 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 da. I've heard somebody call it like this. Chaka, 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 chaka. And it's most commonly used in blues, so there's shuffle rock and roll too. Now that strum, that feel can be used in a lot of different ways. One of the things that I was doing, I was adding a little bit of a lilt to it with my right hand. So it's da, 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 meaning I'm putting a little more emphasis on some beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, on 2 and 4 in the bar. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. On 2 and 4, I'm adding a little emphasis, a little more pressure. Now, this is not something you're going to intellectually just figure out overnight. It's something you listen to, and then you keep practicing. Little by little, you get the feel of it. When you get to the place where you don't have to think about it, and it happens, that's when it sounds really good. It takes time and listening. A little faster. faster. Then we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the other thing I was doing is I was skipping one of the grooves. Listen to this. One of the, strums. See, I'm skipping one down. I'm just passing the strings. This is the same as that pop rock strum that I teach in the course. Down, up, skip, up, down, up. It's applied to with a shuffle strum. Down, skip, up, down, 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 skip, up, down. Just adds a little interest to the strum. And really, if I were playing this, I'd probably alternate a little bit. I wouldn't play the same exact strum all the way through with no variation. Something like that. So back to this 2-note strum. I'm putting my first finger on the 5th string, 2nd fret, and I'm hitting the 6th string and the 5th string together. Now I'm alternating with my 3rd finger on the 4th fret on the 5th string. So I'm hitting first the 2 open notes, the 5th string and 6th string, but I have my first finger on the 2nd fret. Then I put my 3rd finger down on the 4th fret. 1st finger, 3rd finger. So if I were just learning this from scratch, what I would do is just practice first getting those 2 fingers down, not worrying about the groove. Kind of the rock and roll sound. And then I'd try it with the groove. Shuffle. So the 2nd chord, we'll call that an E form because it's taking the place of the E chord. Really, it's just 2 notes of the chord, but it works. In your ear, it sounds like the E chord. Now the A chord is everything moved over 1 fret. So I'm hitting the open A string and the 4th string is D, E. It's A and D notes. Now you might have to practice if you're using your pick, getting in there and hitting just the A and not accidentally hitting the E. But if I hit the E, it's not horrible. Same idea, and I'd practice like this. No shuffle strum. And it probably goes without saying, but don't expect if this is brand new to you to sit down and just get this, and that's the end of that. You have to do a little bit each day so it becomes a habit. So let me show you that form. Those are the only 2 new things I'm adding to it. I'm starting with 4 of these. So this is 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I counted wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1 measure. 3, 4. That's 2 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 3 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 measures of E, and I go over to the A form now. A. That's 1. And that's 2. So that's a total of 6 bars. Now back to the E, 2 more. That's 1 and 2. So that's 8 bars. Now I'm going to do the B7, 1 bar. And an A. Now I'm going to A7. Back to the E. That's 1 bar. And then a B7. So that's a total of 12 bars. Okay? Start slow. Just practice this part. Break it down. Then when you feel you got a little room to grow, try adding the shuffle strum. I'd like to see you practice a shuffle strum separate, the groove. Just do this. Put your fingers over the neck and really break it down to just working on one element at a time, and then put them together. Then okay, so we're ready to go on to the next part. I call this the collapse E chord. I don't know another name for it. There might be a more formal name, but we'll go with that for now. If I come up with one, I'll let you know. It's a sound I think pretty much everybody's heard. What I'm doing is collapsing my third finger and barring, actually creating part of an A right there. Notice that when I collapse a string, I'm uncollapsing on the upstroke. And I'm actually taking my fingers off briefly and letting the open strings play. Except I still have my first finger down. It by itself sounds weird, but quickly in passing it sounds good. It sort of introduces just a little bit of tension that resolves very quickly, which makes it move forward. Gives it that pushing feel. So to practice that, just make your E chord and practice collapsing. So I'm flattening out the finger on the first knuckle of the third string. So E, flatten out, unflatten. And I do kind of tilt my hand down a little bit to just get a little force there. Slow, it doesn't sound very good. So that's something you have to keep in mind when you're practicing, that this will not sound, doesn't sound like this. By the way, there is a more complex version, bar chord. We're not going to bar chords here today, but if you want to experiment with that, feel free. Just practice. Now, when I do the A, I'm actually adding a suspended note. That's an A suspended. So I'm playing the A. And again, you could do the 3-chord form and then use the pinky for that. I'm going to stick with what I feel comfortable with. And then I'm using my third finger on the second string, third fret. That makes an A sus4. The sus4 is that note. That's a D note. So now in the progression I played earlier, I actually added at the very end, the 7th, I put my pinky down on that 3rd fret, 1st string. You can experiment. It's really not a right or wrong. And again, I break it down, kind of get one part first, and if you want to start adding more. So I'm doing. I alternate between that sus and the 7 back. I did regular B7, A, and then I did the lick. I like that lick, and I couldn't resist, but throwing that in there. It's fun. It makes it, this actually, I call it an intro lick, but you can use it even in the pattern. It's actually taking the place of the final B7 chord in the pattern on the 12th bar. So let me just do it without that lick, and I'll come back to that. 1, 2, count the measures, 3, and 4. Here comes 5, A. A7. And back to 7th bar. 8 bar, E7, 9, A. 10, 11, and I'll do the B7 instead of the lick. The lick will take the place of that ending B7 chord. 12 bars again, 12 bar blues pattern in the key of E. By the way, E, if you didn't know, is probably the most one of the common guitar players, keys guitar players like to use, partly because it's easy to solo and the chords tend to sound good, a lot of open chords in the key of E. A is arguably the most popular, but certainly they're somewhere close. Okay, I know this won't be for everybody, but let me break it down. And I'll direct you, by the way, when this is recorded, I'll put some links to a little more detailed lessons. I have some lessons where I actually write out this pattern and I break it down slowly. So don't worry if you don't get it right now, there's a way to come back at it. I'm doing two notes to start with, not really chords. They're in a triplet pattern. What I mean is that it's da, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So once you get the first one, it just moves down by half steps. The first one's on the 4th fret. I'm using my 2nd and 3rd finger. And that's the 1st string on the with the 3rd finger, and the 2nd, 3rd string, 4th fret. Now you can use your pick. I'll talk about the right hand for a second. Hit down and then up on the 1st string and back down on the 3rd string. Sounds like this. Down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. And that's a good way to start. Then move it down by half step and do the same thing. Down, up, down. Again, down by half step. And finally, the 1st fret. We'll call that the 1st half. So it sounds like this. So I think most people will just use a pick, down, up, down. I'm used to using my fingers. And so for me, what's more comfortable is I'm plucking that 1st string with my 3rd finger. So I'm not even recommending this unless you're really like finger picking. But if you do, and I didn't want you to get confused when you see me play. See, I'm hitting that 1st string with my 3rd finger. And I'm hitting the 3rd string with the pick. Then I go to the E chord. We'll go into the 2nd half now. Strike the E, and then I'm doing a riff on the 5th string. Open, 1st fret, and I go right into the B7. I don't stop and play that note. I go open, 1st finger, and then play the B7. But starting from that bass note. So you hear that bass note prominently. Open, 5th, 1st finger, and then B7. Open, 1st finger, and B7. That's a good part to practice. Open, or yeah, I'm not stopping. I'm not doing separate, hit the note and then the chord. I do it all in one time. Open, 1st finger, and then you can try playing along with this if you're ready. If not, just watch it a few times and practice on your own. Let's put that all together. Starting from the beginning, E. That's 1 bar. 2 bars. Okay, if I lighten up a little here. B7. Going to the A. Now I hear in place of the B7 the lick. You could hit the note and then come up on the up too. That sounds good. With blues, don't get too fixed on one way of doing things. That's not how blues develop. It's people experimenting and playing around and then somebody else making a variation on it. Anybody who plays blues well will do a bunch of different variations depending on how they feel. It's very unlike, in that way, classical music, which is kind of, you play the notes and you play what's written, and then you add a little bit of your own subtlety in the way you express the notes. Blues, you're going to add variations and change up. So you'll have your own style. You don't have to do exactly like me. I'm hoping you'll follow enough along to be able to get some facility. I could do it either way. Hit the bass note and strum really fast, or strum the whole chord. They both sound good to me. So that final lick. You can use that lick if you're playing along. One of the things that I find really fun, and a lot of students do also, is to use a background track and just play along with it, play improvise licks and patterns. The way you do that is you first practice some scales that work in that key, and then you practice some licks, and you kind of experiment and fool around with them while you're playing with a background track. This lick is based on the E blues scale, E blues scale. Okay, yeah, I said that right. And actually, I taught that in this month's practice challenge. The E blues scale, just to remind you, is open, third finger, open A. That's the blues note right there, first fret on the fifth string. Then we're back to what would be a pentatonic scale without that blues note. Open. That's one octave. Going up. Oops. Let me do that again. Slow is, for me, much harder. Okay, so that's the pentatonic scale. And that is in this month's challenge. So what I did is I added a note that is part of the scale going up a little farther. And I came down alternating. So I'm third finger there. I'm sorry, I hit the open first. Again, slow. Open, third finger, open, open, third finger, second finger, open, second, open. Wait, got a little mixed up there. Oh, it's the second finger, then open the string next to it, then open the fourth string and down. Again, slow. And again, I'll put a link to a slower version of this, and actually the play along track. It's the last of the practice challenge for the month of May. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to learn blues, this is a great way to add to your blues chops. And if you're not, just pick and choose what works for you out of this. So this is the section now where I'm going to answer some questions. I'll start with the questions that were given to me ahead of time. Let me see. That's why I have my glasses on. I need them for the questions. And feel free, by the way, while we're going, if you haven't already, put some questions in the chat box below. And when I'm done this, I'll take a look at the chat box and see what questions I can answer. So Lee Dixon asks, he says his biggest challenge is changing chords and bar chords. Now, I'm not sure if he meant the changing between bar chords or just changing chords and getting bar chords, but I'll talk about both a little bit. By the way, those are probably the two biggest challenges I hear, that and changing chords in time while strumming. Changing chords is is underrated in a sense, because you're having to, at first, do a lot of things that you're trying to do with your brain. When it actually works and sounds smooth is when you stop having to think about it and your fingers go to the place by habit. But you have to get there, and there are more efficient ways to get there than others. I used to use a system of pivot notes, and what that means is showing people which notes the chord have in common and which fingers to move first. But in the last 5 or 6 years, I've moved away from that. It seems to me that it's best to just practice moving the fingers slowly and having an efficient way to get them kind of programmed to move all together in the right way to the next chord. The best way I found to do that is to start with just 2 simple chords and practice moving to the second chord a little bit every day. Start without the strum, then as you start being able to change on time, I'm doing 4 strums each chord, then add the strum. Change. When that's comfortable, add a 3rd chord. I want to talk about just quickly a metronome. I use this a lot for this kind of practice. Now, the metronome is not the cure-all. And the matter of fact, you don't want to use the metronome all the time. It'll kind of make you start sounding like a robot. And there's times you really want to just focus on your fingering and not on the actual beat. But it's a helpful tool, and it's a helpful tool to practice changing on time. So an example of an exercise like this is I put the metronome on. It's a nice traditional metronome. And then the trick here is to change right on the beat. So I'll start here. 1, 2, ready, start. 3, 4. Now I got to change. 4, change. So I'm aiming at getting right on the beat. And this is slower than you play a song. But that's what you do. Then you pick up the beat little by little. If you find even the very slow setting on the metronome is a problem, try this. Leaving that last chord out to give you time to change. Watch. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3. I'm not playing. Gives me a second to think about which chord I'm going to. 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Then I might want to speed that up. That's easy. That's not very fast. There we go. 1, 3, 4. 4. 4. Now let's add a 3rd chord. 4. 4. 4. Now this is a technique that works. I've used it over and over with students, and I've used it for myself, not for even very complex things. Kind of break it down and then keep adding a little more challenge as you go. It's the same idea as if you're lifting weights. You start with very small weights, you get a little improvement, you get sore muscles for a while, then they recover, and then you feel stronger. Then you add a little more weights, and again, you start over, you get sore again, and then you add a little more weights. I started very small, and they kept adding weights little by little as their muscles grew and got stronger. In this way, your coordination is getting stronger, plus your fingers and your muscle strength. But it's more a matter of that mind-finger connection. Also, I would recommend when you're doing this, do it a little each day. Don't try to do a monumental practice and think that you're going to get it. First of all, it's frustrating because it doesn't usually work that way. And second of all, your mind works better by keep coming back at something a little at a time. It tends to want to go back to where it was, in the case of chords, to kind of forgetting how to do it. But if you keep adding a little bit at a time, your mind just kind of gets in the groove that this is where the fingers are going to go. And they'll do it little by little. 5 minutes a day, maybe a couple times a day, keep coming back at it. I found that things that are boring for me to practice, if I come back at it a little bit at a time each day, it's not as strenuous. It's not as strenuous on my attention span to keep doing that. I still have my regular practice session, but I'll throw in a little extra practice each day on something. And then when I do my practice sessions, it starts coming in easier and easier. Same idea. Work on them a little bit each day. Everybody has problems with bar chords, and especially if you have a steel string guitar. By the way, this is probably the hardest guitar to play bar chords on. An electric guitar is easier because the strings are thinner. And a nylon string, if your fingers are long enough, because the neck's wider, but if your fingers are long enough, it's easier because the strings are lighter, or rather softer, I'll say, because the nylon's softer. This hurts your fingers. By the way, it's easier, if you didn't know, to make a bar chord up here in the 5th fret than down here. Everybody wants to learn the F, the first bar chord, because you need the F for songs, but it's one of the harder ones to play because there's more tension down here. If you practice up in here, it's a little easier, and then back it down. I have students practice just the bar. A little bit each day. Keep coming back at it. 2-3 minutes, a couple times a day. Just practice. And I throw in naming the notes because you're going to need to know the names of the notes on the 6th string and eventually the 5th string as well. So it looks like this. Bar here. Well, let's start from the 5th fret. Let's go with that line. As you teach us starting here, but why not? 5th fret. That's an A note, by the way. A note. Make sure all the notes are sounded. You can take your finger off. Don't stay there for a couple of minutes. It's just going to hurt. Then down 1/2 fret. We'll call that A flat. By the way, it's either A flat or G sharp. It's the same note, depending where you're thinking G 1/2 step up or A 1/2 step down. Okay, back down to the 3rd fret. That's G. 2nd finger. That's okay. Kind of like a spotter, weightlifting. Down 1/2 step. This will be, we'll call it F sharp. It's more common for guitar. We don't use many flats in guitar, so you're going to see F sharp when we play songs. Down to F. That's the hardest one. And then shake it out. Maybe start over. So this is probably the extent of my 2 or 3 minute session, several times a day. And then when that's getting easy, add a chord. So I'll start with the easier chord, which is a E form, I call it, because it's based on the E chord without the first finger, and it just moved up here. This actually becomes an A now, same as the note on the 5th, 6th string. 6th string. Sometimes my tongue gets ahead of my brain. And then down, same thing, only now a full chord. I'll check the notes out and then shake it out. Do it again. Sound good? Oh, is that how yours sounds? That's okay. Let's see if you can get 1 or 2 notes sounding better. Down 1/2 step. And then 1 more 1/2 step. That's the F chord. And then, just for fun, I would do that. And then a good exercise to practice when that gets easy. E. Bounce around, basically. This is a common progression, 1, 4, 5, we'll call it. But you can even just like make up your own. I have exercises, but you can make up stuff too. Just move the chords around instead of doing them by 1/2 steps, because that'll get you used to making those movements like you're really going to have to do in songs. So I hope that helps. I could do a session every week on bar chords and not exhaust what people really need. It's partly encouragement and partly just reminders of how to practice. But bottom line is, little at a time, keep coming back at it. Okay, next question. Is it possible to get carpal tunnel syndrome from playing guitar? Yes. Unfortunately, yes. Though, there are ways to avoid that. I've had, it's a real thing because I've had 2 professional guitar player friends who got the carpal tunnel and had to back off for a while. They went to therapists, got some exercises, went to lighter strings on the guitar, and eventually got back, both of them, to playing full time. The way you get carpal tunnel is not really by playing guitar, it's by playing guitar incorrectly. And too much tension when you don't have to. It's common nature it's human nature to put too much tension when you're first learning, to try to muscle like a barker. To try, if it's not sounding good, try and press harder. But most of the time it has to do with being more accurate. And a good way to work on that is to just play very simple exercises. I'll use this one as an example. If you don't know this exercise, it's one of the first ones I teach students. I call it a speed developer, but it's really more of an accuracy developer. Accuracy turns into speed later, which is where the name came from. Okay, so that's the exercise. I'll link to that in case you don't know it. And it's not the only exercise you can use, but the idea is to just practice putting your attention on how much pressure do I need in my left hand to actually make the note and no more. So I'm pressing the string. Now I lightened up and the note doesn't sound, so that's too little. I'll press down a little harder. There's the note. And see, pressing harder doesn't make the note better. That's the key. Figure out how much pressure you need and no more. Now we'll go on to the next note. I wouldn't spend too long on one note. Try again. That's too little. That's just enough. That's much less than I was pressing before, actually. So maybe I need to do this exercise more. There. That's how much I was pressing before, but it's too much. There, right there. The other thing is I'm getting close to the fret. Back off from the fret, you have to press harder to make the note. I want to get as close to the fret as possible, but not over the fret because that'll deaden out the string. When the flesh leans over the fret, it starts deadening out the string. There we go. Oh, that's too little. A little more. There we are. Now go on to the next string. There we go. So I can already see that I didn't need as much pressure as I was using. Let me try that. Yeah, that's actually relaxing. But you have to go slow and put your attention there. You can't rip through this and actually pay attention to these subtleties. I recommend this for everybody, young and old, because less tension will give you more energy to play longer and practice longer. Plus, of course, it'll protect your fingers from getting carpal tunnel or just straining them in sore fingers. Again, this is something I could go over with once a month or so, and it would still be a benefit. And just a reminder, when for some people it'll always be new. Next question. Oh, Joanna asked about the different forms of the G chord. She's asking if the 4-finger G can be used in place of the 3-finger G. So what she didn't ask could be in place of the 2-finger G or even the 1-finger G. Yes, in short. I use all forms. I don't use the single finger too much, but I use most forms depending on what I'm doing. This form sounds a little bit different, but can easily be substituted with a 3-finger. If I'm moving from here to a C, a lot of times I'll use a 3-finger because it's a quick, short jump to a C chord. I love the sound of this 4-finger G, and I'll use it if I can. It's actually not as hard as you would think because the 3rd finger is kind of supporting the pinky. It actually makes it a little easier on the pinky. This one is probably the hardest one. I don't know. I'd be curious what your opinion on that is. That's my experience. You might have a different experience. Yes, this form can simply take the place of this form or the 2-finger form as well. And then a lot of times you could use a single 3-note form to cover it if these are too hard for you. I encourage you to try different forms to see what it sounds like to you. You'll find that as time goes on, maybe one form will sound better in some situations than others. But it is somewhat subjective. It's not an absolute. She's also asking about the C add 2, which is one of the reasons I use this. I like going from this chord to the C add 2. By the way, let me mention that I've had debates with guitar players where they call this a C add 2, a C add 9. It can be either one. And it seems like the more people want to call it C add 9. No particular reason, just because that's what they've used to hearing. But it's one in the same chord. So if you see C add 2 or C add 9, it's the exact same chord. I asked a lot of people, so I could say I'm almost an expert on whether it should be a C add 9 or C add 2. This chord can take the place of a C, but it depends on what you want. It is a fancier sounding than a plain C. If you're playing a simple folk tune, this might be too much. It sounds too popish. It's an extended chord. It sounds like something more modern. I love the sound, but I use it in its right place. If I'm playing a pop folk song, I might use it. A rock and roll song, almost definitely I would use it. A simple bluegrass song? No. Especially if I needed to use some bass notes and I needed these other fingers free. I wouldn't want to tie them up with down here with my pinky and third finger. I want to leave them available to move around. Here's a case where I would use a G, a 3-finger G, because I want to make this C chord. That's actually a C chord by moving those 2 fingers over. Okay, in general, any chord can have several different forms that you could use, and sometimes there's clearly a better reason to use one form over another. But a lot of times it's somewhat subjective, and it depends on partly what sounds good to you, and maybe partly on logistics too. Sometimes you're playing chords up here, and there's an A you could play down here that would sound good, but the movement going from here to here is too much, so I might want to stay here, and vice versa. If I'm playing bar chords, I might want to play my D here. That's a D bar chord, and I could play D here, but that's kind of a big jump. And it's not just inconvenient, it sounds a little strange to jump all the way from a bar chord to an open chord. So that's it for the questions I have.